Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Indie Reads TV, brought to you by Pages Promotions. I am Diana Catherine Plopa, your host today, and as we do frequently here, we are going to be talking with another independent author. This is my friend Tadashi Moore, really cool guy. You're going to get to know him over the next 30 minutes or so. He is a children's author and illustrator. He does a little bit of children's, a little bit of young adult. Personally, I think his books are swell for anybody, any age. So don't let any monikers deter you from getting into his work. So thanks for being here, Ian.
Yeah, sure. This is great.
We're having fun.
Yeah. We just started.
I know. It gets more fun as it goes on. So tell me about how you decided you were going to write these really cool books. I mean, you're doing something that's pretty neat. I just got to throw this up here. This is Zozan, and
that was the first one. Yeah.
I know we're jumping into, like, I'm throwing all the preliminary conversation out the window just because I'm so entranced by this. These books are so unique. Not just for their stories or for their artwork, but because they have a connection of heritage to you and your family.
Oh, yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about Zozan and that heritage connection?
Sure. Well, I'm half Japanese, and Zozan is a folk song that I had actually never heard. When my first son was born, Elliot, we purchased a CD, and there was a folk singer singing this song, and it kind of caught my ear, like, oh, that's Japanese. She's singing in Japanese, an American singer. Mm-hmm. And she's singing in both languages. I was like, what is that? And I looked it up, and of course, it's this little children's song about a little elephant. I can't remember all the words off the top of my head, but at that point, I said, I want to do something with it. So I wrote down the words, and I started scribbling some drawings for that in my little sketchbook at the time, and then, put it away for like 3 years because Elliot was little, and I was a first-time dad, and I was
way too much going on.
Way too much. Forgot about it, really. I forgot about it until about 2014, and then I found this sketchbook, and I had all these, little sketches, thumbnail sketches of each of the stanzas. I was going to make a picture book out of it, I guess.
Okay.
And I said, I'm going to do something with this, because he was 3 now, and I was getting my mojo back. He's sleeping through the night and all that great stuff. Right. So I actually felt like I had some energy to do this. And now I'm trying to remember exactly how this went down. I just decided I was going to do something with that.
Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of built.
Well, I liked the sketches, I think. When I came back, I was like, wow, what, I did that? and if you see them, I didn't bring them, but they're actually very rough. But I knew there was something there. Mm-hmm. So I decided to follow that. And when I got done with it, I remember asking my friend Kate, she said, I can't wait to read your story. I said, well, there is no story per se. It's just, the 16 lines of the song, but then she made me realize there's a story in there. Mm-hmm. And it had been in my head kind of back here.
Simmering?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because I think, and this may be a little myth or legend-like, but I think I wrote the first draft probably within a week or two. Just, it came out of me, right?
Sure,
like,
sure.
And then it was, a year and a half of editing and refining. I dropped some illustrations that I originally went with, refined them a lot. That took a long time, the whole revision process. And then, as a kid, I still have one of these cassette tapes of Alice in Wonderland by a company called Jabberwocky that doesn't exist anymore. They did a bunch. They did Edgar Allan Poe and stuff like that. But I used to love to listen to these audiobooks. I said, I'm going to make an audiobook out of this because I'd always want to do that.
Sure.
My 5th grade teacher had us do book reports on tape, and so that was, you could consider that sort of the beginning.
Ooh, that's cutting edge.
Oh, yeah, in 5th
I love audiobooks because I'm fascinated with oral storytelling.
Yeah, it gave me a chance to really do
it's such a great opportunity to not just convey a story, but to really convey the mood and the atmosphere and the heritage of the story. Mm-hmm. I love folktales for that, because it's not just the microcosm of the story itself. It's all the stuff that's happening around the story.
Absolutely.
And I'm a fan of bedtime storytelling, and I love campfire storytelling. So audiobooks for me are amazing. The problem I have with audiobooks is not falling asleep.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Not because the story is unengaging,
no.
but because I was trained as a child when your parents read to you at bedtime, you're supposed to fall asleep.
Well, we did that. We worked that for 3 years. Yeah. No, that is part of it.
So did the audiobook come first or the printed book come first?
Printed book came first. Once I got that idea, I had wrote the narrative, wrote the story, started breaking it into chapters and things, and that's when I decided, wow, I want to do an audiobook with this. It gave me a chance to write music, to perform on the audiobook. I got a friend of mine to do the main character. I got Christine, my wife, to do one of the parts. I got a bunch of people to do a bunch of stuff, so it's a collaborative thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So can you tell us the basic story of Zozan?
Sure. It's about a little, well, the song is pretty simple. It's just, it's about a little elephant. He says, I have a long nose just like my mom. Zozan, Zozan, who do you love? I love my mom. But the story is about this little elephant, and he's totally happy with his mom and dad out in this big field somewhere, bamboo field somewhere, and he discovers these flowers, or I actually don't call them flowers.
Okay.
He calls them the colors.
Okay.
And he discovers these one day while he's just wandering around because he meets these ants. Gotta remember my own story. He meets these ants, and they're just sort of wandering somewhere, and he stops them and he says, "What are you doing?" He's like, "We don't know. We're just going somewhere." What do you mean you're just going somewhere? What if you get lost? What if you get hurt? What all these what ifs? And they say, "Well, you know what? You should really just try and go do something.
Just do. Don't think.
Just do.
Just
Don't
do.
think." And he's like, "What?" And they just walk off into the distance. And he thinks about that, and that's when he decides, I'm just going to go somewhere. And that's when he finds these colors, he calls them, and he brings them back to mom, and he's just really excited. And so he just gets obsessed with these things. And shares them with his mom, shares them with his dad, and he goes out on a big, long trek to find, like, the best color ever up on top of the mountain. And
that's very cool.
That's sort of the big
So can you show us a couple of pages?
Sure.
I love the format of this book. It's so different. And the illustrations are, oh my God, so beautiful.
So this is where he's meeting the ants here.
I remember the first time you brought this book into the shop that I was managing, and I was just captivated by the artwork. This is really detailed stuff. How long did it take you to do the art?
Some of them, this one right here where he's talking to the ant.
That's fabulous.
That probably, I might have sketched it a few times to get the composition right, but then I maybe drew it a couple times, a couple hours of actual drawing, which takes place over a couple weeks, really.
Yeah.
I think
because you have a 3-year-old, and
at that point I had a 1-year-old or a newborn too. Some of these took a little longer, the smaller ones, but it was all done on the computer using Illustrator. Let's see, where's another? Like, people seem to like this one too. I like this a lot.
I love the detail, and the expression in his eyes are so cool.
Yeah, they're very human-like eyes. One thing about the computer that I liked is it gives me that forgiveness of I can go in and add this detail. If I were doing this in pen and ink, I think I would have drove myself crazy.
Yeah.
As much as I would love to do it that way, this is just that much more forgiving.
So it's in black and white. Is there a reason you chose black and white rather than color? Was it just to be expedient with getting it done? Or was there an artistic image that you had in your soul that said it has to be black and white?
Well, so it's interesting you asked that because I was at first very self-conscious about that. It was a children's book, and it's black and white. How's that going to work?
It works.
Most children's books are black and white, but part of it was cost. Because when I set out to do this, I had this crazy idea I was going to get the whole thing letterpress printed. And letterpress is prohibitively expensive for most things. But, trying to print more than one color, forget it. I didn't even want to ask. But I managed to raise money on Kickstarter to do that. So I didn't bring that with me, and I didn't think to do that. But that was part of it. I had 36 pages, and I had one color. But really, it's thematically significant because the whole book is about color. He's discovering these colors, and I didn't want to actually be too concrete about that.
Don't want to detract from the discovery?
Yeah. I try and describe the first flower. It changes color, and it wavers in the wind. It's like shiny, like a mantis shrimp or something. I don't know if you've ever seen those. But I didn't want to dull that experience by literally putting the color on the paper. A lot of people tell me it looks like a coloring book. Can I color? I say, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about that, though, is that you're allowing the child's imagination to take over and really say, what did that shimmer look like? What do the changing colors look like in my head?
Right.
Which is a great way for children to become engrossed in the art, engrossed in the story, and it's a way for them to tell the story later when they're talking with their parents about it. So Mom, last night, Zozan, was finding colors, and this is what I saw.
Right. I mean,
it's a great way to discover dialogue with your child.
Yeah. Well, that was part of it. I did not set out to sort of, I don't want to say dumb down, but like I did not necessarily cater to a certain reading level. I mean, people ask me, who's my audience? Who's my audience? I said it's probably, certainly not for a 3-year-old to read on their own, but a 6-year-old, I would read it with Elliot at the time. He was like 4 when I finished. And he'd ask me what this word means. What does that word mean? And we'd talk about it. And
sure.
I find nothing wrong with that.
No, I agree with you.
So that was part of the goal, too, is not necessarily make it simple. It's meant for a book to read to my kids or to your kids rather than necessarily for them to read it on their own.
Right. Well, and again, it's creating that engagement and family culture and all wonderful things. Yeah.
Reading's really important in our family. We've been doing it since day one.
I agree.
Both of them.
I agree.
I still have that first book, Snuggle Bunnies. It's 3 pages. You can get it done in 2 minutes, and he's asleep.
So, I always mispronounce this word. This makes me crazy. It's not that hard a word. Will you say
it's
it?
Tamaishi.
Tamaishi. Thank you.
You kind of blur it together in the middle. I mean, it's 2 parts. Tama.
Ishi.
Yeah. And
okay.
That is significant.
See, I am so conscious of not screwing with your family culture that I don't want to get it wrong.
I didn't know what the word meant until I started trying to look it up.
What does it mean?
The 2 parts, so Tama means jewel, and Ishi means stone, literally, if you take the literal translation. But the thing about Japanese, and I don't speak it, I know enough, I can look words up, and I know a few phrases here and there, but I never really learned to speak it. But poetic, it's a very poetic language, right? Very all the characters are borrowed from Chinese, except for the phonetic ones, but there's phonetic characters and there's these ideographs, and they stand for things, almost like hieroglyphics, I guess.
Okay.
The symbol for Tama, which I think is right here. This is Tama.
Okay.
And that's Ishi. Put them together, and they mean something totally different in a very poetic sort of metaphorical way. So the 2 together, jewel stone, means like diamond in the rough, or
cool.
And it sort of literally refers to, they call Tamaishi stones these spiritual stones that sit out in the middle of some gardens in Japan too. I found that out. I didn't know that, but that's why this resonated with me so much, is because the story is about a little pebble.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So it's about a little pebble named Tama, but it's also about a boulder, and that was the beginning of this story. Is I wanted to write a story about a little pebble and his. Why can't I be like Boulder?
Wait a second. You actually started with, I want to write a story about a pebble.
Yeah.
Let's personify a pebble just for fun. Let's create this thinking, living, emotional being, and let's make it a pebble.
I didn't even think twice about that.
Actually came into your head?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I mean, I honestly, I don't know how well I do at this juncture, right at this moment, how I do with like people stories, like a story about an actual little kid. I mean, I'd like to try, but I seem to identify more with anthropomorphic characters, I guess, elephants and stones.
So tell us about the story then. How does this little pebble, I'm guessing he goes on a journey.
Yeah. I mean, it starts off very much just like I open this scene with this, describing this sort of valley, and I call it the valley where all the little things live, and there's bugs and there's ants. Ants are a very central part to all this. But he's just a happy little pebble. He wants to help out. He's friends with all the grass. He knows them all by name, which I sort of imply. When I was sculpting this story, that was one part that I really liked. I didn't start out knowing that, but one of my editors told me, you should give these characters names, not just call them, the grass or the bugs or whatever. So then I realized, okay, Tama knows everybody's name. It's like if you ever had a kid, they know all the names to their stuffed animals. That's kind of what it's like. Tama knows everybody. He calls them all by name. So whenever he interacts with anybody, that's what he does. But the first chapter, it opens up, you just kind of meet him and his personality, and you get a sense of where this is at, and you kind of get the sense of we're down low. We're in the grass, and there's stuff happening.
And I'm little.
Yeah, he's very little and round, so he rolls around. And a lot of the other, I remember starting very Tolkien-esque. I was going to describe the rocks. These kind of rocks, and there's these kind of rocks. And I wrote it, and I was like, I don't even like that. So we're just going to let it happen. But he meets another rock that says, we're building a bridge because it rained and it flooded out some ants, and we're going to help them build a bridge. And Tom's like, well, can I help? And the other rock's name is Maru, and he's like, I don't know, you're too small. You're not big enough. And that sort of sets the stage. Like, Tom was like, what? What do you mean? And then he sets out on this quest to be, at first, bigger, but it's sort of a red herring. It doesn't actually have to be bigger to be himself, and
So it's another story that teaches children they can be who they are. They don't have to try and be somebody else, and they can still help, and they can still contribute, and they can still be valuable.
Yeah.
Just who they are.
Yeah.
Which is, I whenever I hear stories like this, I always like to coin them as Mr. Rogers stories.
Oh, sure.
Because that seemed to be the prevailing wind of all of his tales. Is it doesn't matter who you are, just that you are.
Yeah. Oh, we just watched that documentary. It's so good.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. So, show me your favorite page
From this book.
from that book. Yeah.
Let's see. Well, this is one of my favorite drawings and characters. It's a little, on this format, it's a little hard to see, but I have another drawing here. So this is a character that he meets about halfway through as he gets lost and wanders off. And I just called them the three, and there's three heads.
So here's the bigger version. Let me hold this out.
The bigger version
so
is,
that we can see it's
it's
in
like
plastic.
You can take it out.
So okay,
That's it.
there we go.
Yeah.
So this way.
Yeah.
Yay.
And that
There we go.
was used as a sort of an end sheet to I had these case bound too, but there's a few of those. But yeah, I wanted to draw this bigger drawing.
I love your use of detail. You're an amazing artist. This is incredible.
I think so. I did this on an iPad, and I didn't realize until I was done that it tracks the number of strokes and the time.
Oh,
it takes to
really?
do it. This took me 16 hours and about 56,000 strokes.
Holy
to
moly.
finish it. And you can see it replay in time lapse. It's amazing. I love that.
Show me some more. I know you brought some more.
This was the other end sheet that goes in the front of the book. And that shows more the scene of the valley. This is another one of my favorite characters, Nio. She's the feather. She's very meditative.
Very cool.
And, in this story, she's a bit of a bit character. I mean, I suppose she comes up more than once, and Thomas saves her. I guess that might be giving too much away, but whatever. So I'm actually writing another book with her as the central character because I liked her so much as a personality.
That's an awesome segue because I was just going to ask you what comes next for you.
Well, so since a little bit before this Tamaishi was finished, I got another idea to write some story about Niall the Feather because I just after writing some of her dialogue and getting that part of the audiobook done, I just really liked who she was. She's just an eccentric kind of meditative person, and I wanted to round her character out in some way. So that's what I've been working on for, I guess, the last 6 or 7 months. Haven't drawn a thing, really. Sketches, yes, but...
So, do any of your characters in your books have siblings, or are they all kind of standalone characters?
Oh, well, that's interesting. Siblings. I'm toying with the idea that one of the characters that she meets either has a sibling, a sister, or brother, but I'm not sure yet. But, I mean, oh, yeah, the dandelions. The dandelions in this book... They're all brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles. I make a little quick dad joke about that in here. There's just so many of them, and they're all over the valley.
Yeah.
So Kuro, the big dandelion here, it's got a lot of relatives. So yes, I guess so. But most of the time they just kind of exist on their own, I guess. Unless you consider all the grass to be siblings. I give them all sorts of international names on purpose.
Okay.
To sort of give that
for the inclusivity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was not an accident.
Yeah. So you have children?
2 boys.
What are the boys' reactions to your books? What kind of reviews have you gotten from the boys when you read these?
Well, Elliot keeps it on his shelf, and we haven't read it probably since about December, but I know he thinks highly of it. He's on the audiobook, and I know he wants to be in a new one.
That's
great.
great.
One. So Marcel hasn't really. I think they both like it, but I know Elliot's been the one to tell me. He's like, implicitly, he likes my book.
And how old are the kids?
Elliot's 8, and Marcel is now almost 6.
Okay. So he hasn't really formed any critique kind
No,
of
not like
language
that.
yet.
but they love listening to it.
Mhm.
I'd say they like listening to it almost more than they like me reading it, because they like hearing the music and how that fits in with the story and the
Well,
sound
sure.
effects that I've gotten in
And
there.
again, that's that oral storytelling that we were
Yeah.
talking about, that just, it's a whole package. It really is.
It really helps. I love doing all those things.
I mean, I loved sitting down with my son and reading him stories at bedtime, but we had a deal. I would read him 3 stories at bedtime, and then to fall asleep, he would listen to an audiobook on tape.
That's not a bad idea.
So he got both. And it worked really, really well.
Yeah.
To the point that at 3 years old, we were at a restaurant, and he stood up on the bench and he recited the entire Batman book that he had been listening to on tape. And he's 3, and he memorized the whole thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I definitely understand the power of audible storytelling. I think it's important.
It makes a big difference, I think. Especially for when I wrote it, Marcel was like 3.
Yeah.
So he would listen to Zosan and he would know, is he going to be okay? Like, he could tell, maybe not understanding every single word, but just through the whole experience, he knew what was going on.
Sure.
Something bad was happening.
Yeah.
Is he going to be all right? Yeah, I remember that moment.
So what's been the biggest challenge for you and writing these books? If you had to pick one thing where you said, oh, gee, I wish I'd known that before I got involved.
One thing?
Yeah, just one.
that I wish I knew before. I guess I kind of wish I knew how to balance my time better. Mm-hmm. That is the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
I think with Zosan, I was really in a stride there at the end. I was like sectioning off time, and this was a little harder. It was compounded, I suppose, by the fact that I was trying to finish my cousin's book. That's another story, but yeah, just time management. That's hard.
Yeah.
But you got to make time for it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That is what I learned.
It doesn't get done if you don't sit down and do it.
And it doesn't matter if it's 5-10 minutes. Write something. Read something even. Don't just be like, I'm too tired. I'm not going to do anything. It's all input as far as I'm concerned. I've actually picked up a bunch of indie authors now to sort of feed that.
Sure, yeah, yeah. What was the biggest editorial challenge that you had? I mean, I know some authors that go through 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds of editing, and it's often the biggest challenge is finding just the right turn of phrase or finding just the right description of scene. What was your biggest editorial challenge with these books?
I tend to overwrite, I found.
Okay.
I have these long, like I said, I was going to describe all the rocks and give them dichotomies, and that was too much. So I had to cull a lot of stuff. In this book, I didn't feel like I had to cut full chapters out or anything like that. It's relatively short. It's 14,000 words. But I don't know. I kind of enjoyed that process. One thing I like about how I've got this set up is I'm not on really any deadlines other than my own. So I can take my time doing this. So yeah, I'd go back and read a chapter. I'm still listening to the music, and I'm going to change some of it before I, burn it to a permanent disc. But I'm always doing that. I'm always reading it and listening. There are some things about Zosan I would definitely change if I were reprinting it, for example.
Okay.
I like that sort of long burn editing process. It doesn't bother me, especially since this isn't really that long. I can't imagine trying to do that with, like, say, a 50,000 word novel or more. That, I think I drive myself crazy.
It's terrific fun.
Yeah, but maybe not. I tried doing NaNoWriMo. That writing that much was not in me. This seems like my pace right now.
Yeah,
about 20,000 words.
For me, the short story collection was where the challenge was.
It's a different. Yeah, I imagine it's a different challenge because you have those constraints.
Yeah, that was a little different. Yeah. I am having some technical delay here, but okay, we're just going to keep going with it.
No,
so, what was the most joyful part of these projects for you? What was the part where you said, I will do this again, and it's all because of this?
When I had this in my hand, and I had the audiobook, and I'm listening, and I remember for this part of the story right here, I'd written a short piece about 2 minutes long to go along with this sort of discovery he's making. That's when I knew I was just like, I have to keep doing this at that moment. Yeah, I remember that. it almost, brought tears to my eyes. I was like, I can't not do this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's just been sitting there waiting for me.
That's the moment where you go, okay, I have this calling now, and I have to answer it. And if I don't, I'm going to make myself nuts.
Yeah. And it isn't to say that I'm all of a sudden, writing every day and all that stuff. No, it's that hasn't changed. It's still a balance and it's a challenge. But I have this sort of compass pointing towards I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm just going to keep writing and do it at my own pace.
So do you find the story more challenging or the art more challenging?
Depends. I think the story right now is still the challenging part. With the artwork, I think it depends on how much I try and push it. But I feel like I've found my style. This took a while to get to feeling like I like what I'm doing. I don't know, I suppose.
Kind of felt intrinsic at some point where you kind of went, okay, that switch is flipped.
Yeah, like this is good. I can do it this way, and it doesn't have to be like this or like that or anything like that. I think the story is the hard part because that's where the sort of the mental images come from, and once that's done, I can sketch something out and refine it and refine it and refine it.
So here's another step beyond to take that thought to another level. I often ask musicians, what comes first, the music on the page or the music in your head? So what comes first for you? The art images, not necessarily on the page, but do you see the images in your head, or do you hear the story in your head? Which one comes first, story or pictures?
Pictures come first, because that's how it started with Zosan. It was I got the words and I got the gist of the song, and I just started seeing things that would go with each one of those stanzas.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, definitely the pictures like, even though I haven't drawn anything for the book I'm working on now, the follow-up book, I know what I want to do, but I'm focusing on the words right now and trying to describe these scenes and get the arc of the story down and how these characters interact and all that kind of stuff. But yes, you're right. The images come first, I think, whether I realize it or not.
I am super excited to see the next book. I can't wait for it to come out. And I'm so pleased that you were here with me today.
Yeah,
this has been a true treat. From the moment you walked in to the bookshop and showed me your books, I've just been enamored, and I just love them. So thank you for taking your time to spend with me today.
Thanks.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Have a great night.
You too.